This is SSN.
Story Studio Network.
Hi, I'm Dean Gation, and this is the Powerful Connections Podcast. For over 40 years, I've been involved in planning and building high-voltage projects. My company, DGG5 Advising, is the opportunity maker you need for your energy and construction projects. My guests and I are going to share our experiences and how we have brought projects to successful completion. We are going to talk today about the world going electric. There are so many issues, and we could talk about all the exciting things happening in developing design and projects. We want to focus in this episode on the procurement part of the industry. We need to talk about the new normal for the status of the electrical grid supply chain. We have a treat today. We have two guests. This is a big discussion, so we needed three of us. First, please welcome Rob McNeil, President, Composite Power. I have known Rob about 20 years through his development, working as an engineer at Hydro Ottawa, then moving into various technical sales roles, working for RS Poles, HD Supply, and then Composite Power. September 2022, was named the president of Composite Power. Rob, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Dean. It's crazy. It's been about 20 years since we've known each other. I can remember going back into your office in about 2006, working with RS, when your company was one of the first ones to put our FRP poles into a transmission line in Canada. So I was working in a technical sales support role at that time. So definitely go a long way back. As you mentioned in kind of the overview of my resume, I've worked in a number of different technical sales roles. So I've worked with a utility, with a manufacturer, with a distributor, and now an electrical sales agency. I like to think that these experiences make me and my business partners too a good technical engineering supply chain matchmaker. What Composite Power, what we really do is we're really good at identifying companies that have the right mix of capabilities to supply electrical equipment to the Canadian utility market. That's a little bit about me and when I'm not working. I'm chasing two kids, 13 and 10, who are both in competitive sports, putting lots of miles on my truck these days.
Those are the important things these days. We also want you to please welcome Alexi, CEO of Northern Transformers. Alexi was appointed CEO in 2016, has been involved in manufacturing and transformers for the better part of 30 years. So Alexi, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Dean. No, it's Miecznikowski. Born and raised here in Ontario. Grew up, actually a lot of my family's from the Niagara area. So we always were thinking about those giant generation units on the Niagara River there. And so I guess I had a fascination as a kid with the whole power system. Ended up also in engineering, had a career in manufacturing and really in the global industry, working in many countries, not in the power industry originally. And after 20 years of that, I came back to manufacturing in Ontario when I joined Northern Transformer as the CEO. So that was 2016. And so I've really spent the last 8 years, building a team and a facility here that designs and builds power transformers in Ontario. We're in Maple, just north of the city of Toronto. And it's been quite a ride. We were 40 people when we started. We're 140 now. With hindsight, looks like we had a crystal ball, but it sure didn't feel that way at the time, I can tell you that. We're delighted with, the fact that this is really booming now. On a personal side, I've got 3 kids. They grew up real quick, so 2 are in college, and the baby's now in grade 10. You think about your kids and their future employment, and you think, wow, what a great industry this is. So you encourage them. But, I think it's still invisible for a lot of young people. And I sit on the board of the ElectroFed, which is the Association of Manufacturers and Distributors for the Canadian electrical industry. And one of the key themes that we work on is how to get young people to be aware of this industry, to understand what a great industry it is in terms of opportunity for their career and stability and growth. And so that's really important.
Thanks very much. We've always talked about if your parent is a doctor or nurse or police officer or fireman, everybody knows about it. But when your father or mother is a engineer or a line worker or utility worker, they're going, what? What's that? So we are very modest in our industry, and we need to be more boisterous about what's there and the opportunities, because we lead a lot of the things that are going on, and it's going to be very exciting for things to happen here. So Rob, tell us a little bit about Composite Power and some of the things that you're doing.
Composite Power is a company that I own in conjunction with a number of business partners. And we're all technical sales professionals that either have engineering degrees or some type of equivalent industry experience. When we really work on the supply of equipment into distribution, transmission, and substation applications. Our team supplies sales and marketing services to different manufacturers and consultative selling support to different end users. Right now, we've got 22 people located across Canada. And as you know, this industry is growing. We hope to be 25 by the end of next year. To give you an example of the services that we provide, we actually work for Northern Transformer. They're one of the clients of ours. So we provide sales and marketing support for Northern from Quebec to BC, in the Atlantic provinces and up north in the territories as well. In addition to that, we built a portfolio of industry-leading factories we work with. Most are in Canada or the US, but some are in Europe or other countries overseas. And we sell everything from hardware to insulators to steel poles, conductor, optical ground wires, circuit breakers, and of course, power transformers. Composite Power, we've also got a partnership with Nipissing First Nation, which we'll talk about a little bit further later on in the podcast. But I sit on the board of Bising Power, which is the partnership we own with Nipissing First Nation.
Thanks, Rob. Alexi, give us a little brief on Northern Transformers and who they are.
Northern was founded in 1981 by three veterans of the transformer industry. Bill Kemp, who was with GE and was a commercial lead there. And then Doug Hazelton and Eric Borgenstein, who were the senior technical engineers in the company. And they saw an opportunity at that time. You know, Ontario had some major power transformer manufacturers at the time, and they were focused, let's say, on the big fish. And they saw an opportunity to service the 44 kV and below, particularly commercial and industrial, and also for the LDCs. And so that was the company. They operated out of a facility not far from where I am now, in Concord. And they had a real practical, value-driven approach, and it was really successful with clients. And I think it was great. They summed it up in their motto, quality you can count on from people you can talk to. And certainly that's something we aspire to today as well. And I think that, you know, the quality you can count on is, of course, always critical. But the people you can talk to, you know, I think sometimes that's a forgotten art these days. And it's something we really focus on our team. So in 2012, Giovanni Marcelli, you know, a very successful entrepreneur, purchased the company. Anyone who's met him will remember him. He's very passionate. He loves to be in the facility first thing in the morning and talking to the people doing the work right in the production floor. Well, he was at his previous company. He was also in the electrical industry, and he heard a professor talk about the shortage of people that were anticipated in this industry because there was such a wave of retirements hitting, and also the antiquated and archaic nature of a lot of the infrastructure. And so that kind of resonated deeply with what he had experienced. And when the opportunity came to buy Northern, he saw that as his vision, right, to fill this opening gap. We set about building a company to restore Ontario to the prominence it enjoyed in design and manufacture of power transformers. So immediately after the purchase, you know, we set about finding a new facility. We ended up having to build a custom-built facility to our needs. So on the bright side, it's a state-of-the-art, beautiful facility. And in 2016, we cut the ribbon on it, and that allowed us to build units up to 160 kV. And shortly thereafter, we decided to do an additional expansion, which we cut the ribbon on this year, which brings us up to 240 kV. And depending on, the detailed specs, somewhere between 100 and 200 MVA. Beautiful. And that's, quite a steep ride, but it's been a real pleasure. One of the worries we always had was, could we find the talent? And we've been finding the talent each step of the way. So that's, I guess, in a nutshell. I would add that we're focused on the utility market predominantly, but we also serve, the resource sectors in Canada, mining, oil and gas, pulp and paper, and also renewable energy projects.
That's pretty extensive resume in a short time period. Fabulous to hear that. And made in Canada is always a good thing to talk about. Let's talk a little bit about the trend towards electric vehicles is forecasted to be 60% of the vehicles by 2030. Many of the mineral markets say, given the sheer magnitude of the tonnage of lithium and cobalt and raw materials needed for EV batteries, this is unrealistic and it would require about 300 new mines and their supporting refineries to be open and operating before then. The other issue will be the massive demand on the grid to charge vehicles at night when everybody comes home. This will be peak hours and peak rates, so energy management and getting people to manage their charging to do it during the day or early morning will create a whole new other issue. On top of that, the supply chain issues are now just the new normal. This is not COVID anymore. The ability to obtain supplies, manufacture electrical equipment, and deliver is now doubling. The demand-supply issue is huge. The need for raw materials is larger than the ability we have to produce materials. For instance, copper's an item that the demand is 4 million tons larger than the world's ability to supply. So recycling is now a bigger requirement than ever before. So give our listeners some quick opening remarks on demand, manufacturing, delivery, and issues of manufacturing capacities. Rob, give me your opening thoughts.
Yeah, for sure, Dean. Really, this has turned into a global issue, and we see it right here on the ground in Canada. And we hear about it from talking with our counterparts in the US. The whole world has woken up and realized that we're way behind on investment in the grid. I can remember thinking back with Composite Power just a couple of years ago, we would get really excited when working across Canada. We would see, one or two big projects. And today we're dealing with first of all of our utility customers have increased their capital spending. Second of all, we're dealing with major grid renewal projects and new generation right across the whole country. We're seeing green hydrogen out east. Hydro-Quebec is announcing an expansion program like we've never seen before, and they're already building an HVDC line into the US. We have energy storage projects in Ontario, plus upcoming small modular reactors and new nuclear connections. As we head out west, Alberta is spending again, building transmission lines. We're seeing industrial electrification as well, with a couple of new electric arc furnaces going in across Canada. All of these things mean more poles, more wires, more circuit breakers, more transformers. And candidly, there just wasn't enough capital going into manufacturing facilities prior to COVID to keep up with this. So we're sitting in a position where people are competing for capacity. It means every day we're having to tell customers that, unfortunately, we can't deliver your equipment in 2024 or in some cases even 2025. So this is the reality that some of our customers are dealing with. But again, at Composite Power, we're very much looking to work with our manufacturing partners to help understand our pipelines, the needs, so that they can invest in their facilities and growth the way that they need to.
So, Alexi, tell us a little bit about how you see these major changes affecting your business and what has to happen.
Yeah, it's a similar story for transformers. Maybe one of the more extreme stories in some ways. I think the quality of the products remains critical. The costs resulting from poor quality is off the charts for everybody. there's no ability to sacrifice on quality, and nobody would want to go there. So that, in spite of the strong demand, people are still trying to be very, very careful and don't want to make quick changes in terms of suppliers or sort of Hail Mary supply options. And, for established players, it takes time to scale up. These products are still largely handcrafted, both in the design sense, where the designers are in a very human way working through all the conflicting requirements, and that takes time and skill. And then the products are built by hand largely, because they're so custom and they don't amend themselves easily to automation. So adding capacity is a challenge. The other thing is, of course, as the transformer lead time is extended, it also obscures the fact that the supply chain that feeds the transformer facilities has similar challenges. So even if we could radically increase our capacity overnight, let's say, I don't think we would be able to achieve the inputs of the raw materials in any case. So, if I think of the magnet wire makers, the core steel suppliers, or even for that matter, bushings and LTCs, while everyone's investing in increased capacity, it will take time for all those capacities to come together at the same time to allow us to increase. And of course, we're competing, right? So as you mentioned, electric vehicles and so forth, many of these products compete for the same upstream supply chain constraints.
True.
Core steel is a classic example. If you consider what happened to core steel over the last 2 years now, many factors all came together at the same time. So you had mills that traditionally made the grain-oriented electrical steel for transformers that started switching some of their lines over to non-grain-oriented for the electric motor market. You had increasing efficiency standards in Europe, in China, in the US, actually coming to Canada too. And those are driving mills to produce higher grades of steel, which result in less capacity on the same line. So as they were switching their lines over to the higher grades, the tonnage came down significantly. Now they're better materials, but still takes time for them to add more capacity. And then on top of that, the war in the Ukraine disrupted the Russian steel supply, which was a significant portion. And China was effectively not exporting. They were consuming their materials domestically. So all of these factors came together, and you saw, core steel prices essentially double or even more than double over the last 24 months. Those things are market supply signals, right? We're in a market economy, and the vendor base is reacting and adding capacity. One of my key suppliers has just put a new line in, fully automated. We're looking forward to seeing the production coming off that line now.
Good.
So it's coming, but all these things take time to trickle through.
What do you see as some of the big positives in the trends and changes, Alexi?
Well, I think it's fantastic that the amount of investment is starting to be made here at home. So, I think 100 years ago, when we think about it, people were also at a time where the electricity network needed an incredible upgrade, right? So the cities and towns had power, but the rural areas didn't. People saw the opportunity and the quality of life that came with a reliable electricity supply. And so, everyone knew that it had to be done, but they didn't know how to pay for it. And it just feels like a real echo of that today, where we know we need to make these investments, but we're struggling with how to pay for them. But at the same time, you go look at OPG has a little museum by Big Chute, Ontario. So there's an old power dam there. And when they decommissioned the old powerhouse and built a new one a few years ago, they left the old powerhouse, and you can walk through, the feedstock pipes, and you can see the turbine and the generator and so on. And, the brass nameplates are all there still. and you can read Hamilton, Peterborough, Toronto, Montreal. That's where all the stuff was made. So the country made a massive investment for the right reasons, but they also were able to retain a lot of the benefits of that investment throughout the economy and by investing at home. And I think that's the real bright side. The opportunity here is to, really build our sector from top to bottom. And I can tell you, like with Northern Transformer, when we build a transformer, almost all of our suppliers are here in Ontario.
Good.
So our core steel, our magnet wire, our insulation systems, our even the luminol from Petro-Canada. So there you go.
We built a small run-of-the-river hydroelectric project in the late 80s, and our generator came from Peterborough, and it was nice to see the manufacturing that was done locally, and we went and watched it get shipped to here and craned in. It was nice to see. Rob, where do businesses need to focus on improving their ability to get items they need?
Let's go back to that comment I made a little bit earlier about this idea of a bit of a competition for capacity. When I say that, I'm not suggesting that people need to abandon their RFP processes and go into panic buying mode. What I'm more suggesting is that customers need to recognize that factories with limited capacity will tend to contract with customers that are better organized, clear with their requirements, and then can move forward in a timely fashion. So people that are easy to do business with, that are investing in a supplier-customer relationship, companies with old and incomplete specifications, unclear demand forecasts, or long, complex processes, they might just find themselves on the outside looking in and dealing with their second or third choice for suppliers. So people will be able to find the equipment they need. If you want to work with the top tier partners, the best in the industry, make sure you're coming forward with a clear set of specifications and you understand your process and what you want to go through as that's happening. Second, innovation. This is an area, go to conferences all the time in our industry. There's a lot of talk about innovation, energy storage, grid modernization. Our industry is really big on talk when it comes to innovation. We really need it. We need more of it. But execution is really lacking due to regulatory barriers and underdeveloped risk management frameworks. I can see a lot of parties working on this. People are trying to get their head around it and understand it. But if we're going to be able to get the level of investment done, we need to be able to reward innovative suppliers with faster go-to-market and better structured contracts that in the end will help save the entire grid money. The last thing is networking and development. I see a lot of young engineers, younger people in this industry that are trying to learn the industry behind their desks or behind their computer. Work from home is great when it comes to flexibility, lifestyle, all these types of things. But it's really hard to create a business network from behind your desk. We need to get the next generation of leaders out. Alexi mentioned he's on the board of Electrofed. That's a great organization. There's also things like the EDA, CanRIA, Electricity Transformation Canada. There's all kinds of organizations that can help people build their networks. Whether you're looking at buying from a supplier, finding contractors, or even getting information in this industry, I can't underemphasize how valuable it is to get involved.
Well, that's what we call powerful connections, right?
Yes, sir.
Do you feel, Alexi, that the industry, contractors, customers, users of your products and services realize that planning needs to go from a few weeks and months to a year or more as procurement plans and procurement purchases? Do they know they need to get to a year or two ahead of their requirements, just change their mindset and their planning?
I think the message has gotten out there at this stage. 2 years ago, there was sort of shock and questioning. And at this stage, most people know, they don't necessarily know how bad, right? They sort of ask and they wince and they wait for the answer. And you can see them tense up until they find out whether or not their project can be delivered to meet their schedule. I mean, in terms of transformers, which are, again, from what I've heard, the hardest nut at the moment. Some factories are 3-4 years booked up. Most product categories are around the 2-year mark, I would say, at the moment. But I can tell you, if you're hoping to do a project even in the 3 or 4 year time frame, you should already be talking to at least a short list of partners and making sure they're aware. And that communication is the name of the game here, right? Manufacturers don't want to disappoint, and will absolutely work, as Rob was saying, with people who are open and clear about what they need. And I reserve production slots for good clients all the time, and try to make sure that they're successful, because I know that's a big part of being a good supplier to them. We also have clients who, have really good visibility of their schedules and have literally booked slots out to 2030, wow. Which I couldn't imagine happening years ago, but that's the reality now. So that's, it's nice. And, the upside to this is it unlocks the opportunity for us to put in more capacity and to invest in the future. So,
Rob, we see the, talk about the climate change and how it's affecting us in many ways. And storms are more severe and more often, and materials needed for utilities to be available is increasing, damage is worsening. What are your suggestions and thoughts on more materials readily available?
We're consulting with our customers all the time, Dean, bringing factory experts in to work with the different engineering departments. And we see a lot of pull in, especially from the T&D engineers looking at system hardening. And of course, manufacturers are responding with products that can help increase the level of reliability. And this is everything from new types of conductor to deliver more power, to different structure types. And again, it kind of maybe ties back to some of the comments that had an innovation before. This industry could be very stuck in its ways. There's some things that have worked very well for the last 100 years, but we need to be looking beyond it. I'll use the example of wood poles. I understand why they're easy to climb and easy to work with. They're effectively ingrained in our customers' DNA. But I still don't understand why they live with them getting destroyed by pests and woodpeckers and storms all the time. Engineered materials are available. They can be used to engineer the grid, to harden it. Design codes are already adapted for their application. Really, our utility customers need to spend more time looking at some of these new materials, whether it be for structures or other things, and then look at how they're going to adapt their processes and equipment to allow them to work with the things that are going to help them deliver the levels of reliability that they need for the future.
Do you think you're seeing more and more toughness then and system evaluation going on? Do you see those standards and specs changing to deal with the more severe weather?
Absolutely. We're seeing codes and standards being adapted to things like reliability-based design practices. Streamlining of tests in order to make equipment easier to qualify. There's still a ton of work for the industry to do in this front. And again, it goes back to the comments on getting involved. We need engineers, suppliers, the people that know involved in industry working groups, whether that be through the CSA, IEEE, or some of the other networking groups to help solve these problems. There will be regional solutions to things. We have different weather in BC than we have in Ontario. Different challenges. But it doesn't mean that, we have to reinvent the wheel for every situation. There's lots of opportunities for people to collaborate, adapt, and learn from each other so that we're not applying maybe the completely unique solution province to province and customer to customer that's kind of been the tradition for the last 40 or 50 years.
The state of existing transmission is at or past end of life, and good specifications of 70 years ago have come to be of great value, but we're in a situation for many of the existing transmission lines that they're not only needing replacement, but are being loaded more than ever due to demand. Do you see the effects on systems and the demand for materials and equipment, Alexi?
Yeah, I think there's a few ways that's sort of appearing for us. One is, common scenarios to try and fit more in the same space. So people ask for 10, 20% more MVA on the same footprint. And, it's not unusual for them to say, I want to use the exact same cables. So, you're not allowed to be any bigger. And when you couple that with, CSA efficiency requirement increases and quieter operation often, it can be quite challenging actually to design something that'll fit all those requirements. But those are good challenges, and they're the kinds that we thrive on. The other thing I see is, utilities using mobile substations to help bridge gaps. It can take a long time to get a new substation permitted, and they'll bring something like that in to help them to get to that point. And monitoring, there's been a lot of, I would say, experimentation, dabbling even with monitoring over the years, but I do feel like it's maturing, and there's some good open standards there. So, a mature system that's got some open standards so it can fit into many different client networks and situations. There's a lot of promise there, and actually we'll be announcing something in the new year on that topic.
Cool. The demand is far exceeding supply. The demand for copper we've talked about is exceeding world supply. The delivery on transformers increased. Many other items are longer delivery. The days of ordering line materials 4 weeks and cables in 14 weeks is long gone. How do you see the manufacturing industry changing in expansions, and is there more items to do? And, is there access to certain things due to these conflicts and changing views?
One wild card, of course, is the conflict in the Ukraine. The sheer amount of capacity that had been removed from the system, but now even more to replace. We don't know what the timeline on that will be, but it's massive. For our industry, a common crunch point is going to be copper. And, it's again, difficult to predict how much more will come on stream as the market signals go out to the mines. But at the same time, how much substitution could happen, right, for all the products that use copper. But at the end of the day, it looks like it'll be one of those pinch points. Those two are major, drivers of what we're going to look at. But in general, the industry is reacting. I mean, it feels like a week doesn't go by without another announcement of a new capacity increase. We're working on our own plans to see how far we can increase our capacity as well. And I'm sure I'm not unique there. Everybody's working on that opportunity.
Is there items to talk about in the supply chain issues today, Rob, that have probably happened in the last couple of years? Is there something you want to deal with, talk about, or identify that people need to hear about?
I think in terms of the supply chain issues, over the last few years, we've seen factories go through a number of challenges. So through COVID, we dealt with, of course, supply disruptions, and then absenteeism in factories. That in some regions that was worse than others. I can say that in the southeastern U.S., where quite a bit of our equipment comes from, they had quite a challenge with absenteeism around COVID-19, and then subsequently being able to attract and retain people at factories coming out of it. Things seem to have stabilized a little bit more at this point. But if you've had that kind of turnover with staff, you also lose some of the tacit knowledge that they've developed around building things. So, in some cases, that's led to more issues with quality control. So things being delayed because of rejections at the factory for quality. I mean, ultimately, factories are still producing quality goods. It's just there are other things that are sometimes disrupting the flow. And it comes back to those relationships and communication. So I know our top suppliers in Composite Power, we work very hard to make sure that communication between the factories and customers is as tight as it can be. We've bolstered our own open order processes to try and help make up for some of those gaps, because it's all about setting expectations, making sure our customers know when the equipment's going to show up. And I think those are the things that on the customer side as well, in the past, if a piece of equipment was delivering in 4 to 6 months, or even less, people could give you a date and it would come plus or minus a week, plus or minus a few days.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if people are quoting 50 weeks, 100 weeks, um, you know, your piece of equipment is gonna come close to that, but it's not gonna show up on the day that 100 weeks occurred. So there definitely needs to be ongoing communication and management of those expectations
time
around
period.
delivery.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. What is the positive things in the future and the great outlook? There's so much happening in the next 10 to 15 years. I just think about the projects I'm involved in right now. They're off the charts. Tell me the major things you see happening in the supplier and manufacturing sectors that, Alexi, are such positive signs for the future and the outlook.
Yeah, Dean, it's been really interesting getting this facility up and running. We had this combination of veterans that had been in the industry, and I think we're kind of frustrated because the industry had gotten kind of dormant. So they were really rejuvenated and are rejuvenated, and many of them came out of retirement to help us do this project. And then on the other hand, we have these young, ambitious, bright engineers and people from all walks in the company, working with the veterans together. And it's just such a exciting thing to be part of. It's so much fun. On a personal level, that's the part I look forward to. Just achieving these big projects. In our case, it's in the factory. In your cases, it's out in the field. It's so rewarding. And to have that team of people who had done it in the 70s and 80s still around telling us their wisdom, and then, the young crew picking up the ball and running with it, that's the part that really, I feel excited about. Yeah, there's technological changes, but let's face it, the power transformer is still very similar to how it was before. Around the edges, we use a lot of advanced computing to help optimize the designs, and the materials have gotten a little better, but fundamentally, it's a very human process to build these. I think that's what makes it a great segment.
Thanks. We had fun. It's 20 years ago now when we created a track vehicle manufacturing business, and all the things that have changed recently just in engines and track design and so forth. Rob, Composite Power has already made some great strides in the last 10 years, and one lately being your appointment to president. Congratulations on that. Talk to us about the developments at Composite Power that we need to know about, and what do you see the next 5 years for you and your organization?
The next 5 years is absolutely going to be one of growth. We've converted the company into a partnership. We're kind of more like a law firm or an accounting firm. And the way that we retain top talent now is by letting people that we bring on board participate in the decision-making of the business and the profitability through the equity ownership. We think that model's been a real good way for us to attract some of the best people in the industry that want to work in a consultative sales capacity. To come and work at Composite Power. We're 22 people today. I think we'll be 25 by the end of next year. We're keeping a finger on the pulse of the way our customers are growing and the way projects are developing. We think there's a strong need for our services, again, because of the demographic changes that we've talked about, the retirements that are happening with our customers. There needs to be a retention of knowledge and a maintenance of the relationships between the manufacturing base and our end user customers, whether they be the engineers or the people that are doing the buying. So we think that our role doing that here on the ground in Canada, using people that are familiar with Canadian standards, Canadian construction practices, and the real needs of the grid is a winning formula. We can't manufacture demand for some of the things that we sell, but the fact of the matter is our customers are ready with some of the biggest capital budgets that they've ever had, whether it be new projects, and we're ready to support it. So we want to grow our team accordingly and keep developing the market that way.
Going to be exciting. The next big discussion these days is around manufacturing capacity, and we've touched on that a little bit, Alexi, already. But what are the items manufacturers have to deal with in deciding to stay the course with the people and the manufacturing capacity they have? Or do they go to more shifts or even invest in expanding? So many items in the risk discussion of financing, the time to design, procure new building and equipment, the time to build a new facility, and then finding and training new people. Tell us a little bit of that balancing act and risk management and decision-making you're going through these days.
The first priority is do as much as you can with what you have now.
Mm-hmm.
And, that means really looking at the bottlenecks, looking at your value streams, making sure you're getting as much as you can from the team that you have. And then adding more people, adding shifts, adding space, those things start to come up. In our business, every time you make an adjustment, your bottleneck moves around. So keeping a really clear view of how things are flowing and addressing those bottlenecks. But eventually you're going to get to the point where you're going to have to make some big decisions around investment. And that's where communication with your clients and your suppliers and to the extent you can, holding hands with them and jumping onto the next big investment. Permitting, construction costs, you're competing with in a very, very tight industrial market, land and so on. All that's a challenge. But on the bright side, what we found is that it all still works. You can get it done. And we've got a project completed, and we're very happy with the quality of the work that was done. It was done on budget and on time. It was a slightly adjusted timeline due to COVID, but still, I'm delighted with having it done, getting the ribbon cut. So, it's doable. I look at it that way. I'd also say we are still finding talent. We're finding young people who want to work in our facility. I know there's a lot of people saying it's really hard to find talent, and I have sympathy for it. But my belief is that if you give them a good place to work, you give them clean, safe, an environment where they feel respected as individuals, the management team knows their first name and comes and says hello to them every day. Those basic things, they solve that challenge. We're finding the people, and I actually don't think that'll be the major challenge going forward. The high interest rates, of course, that makes everything a little bit harder to get over the line financially.
Let's talk about the item we mentioned earlier in the episode, the Indigenous relations. Very high priority. Great innovation of partnering with Nipissing First Nation to create and launch BSync Power. Rob, Christine Goulet is doing a great job. Hydro One and OPG are already big customers. Talk to us about the development and the plans you and Christine have for the future of electrical supply in Ontario and Canada.
Yeah, we're very excited about the future for BSync Power. Going back a step, I need to give some credit to Christine and to Richard Boy for developing the partnership and kind of seeing the future there. They really understood the need for capacity building in the north. And that's got a couple of meanings for us. When it comes to BSync Power, one of the direct things we're trying to do with that company is create jobs at Nipissing First Nation so that highly skilled people like Christine can live and work in their home communities. But the other part of it is also on the bigger scale, try and go out and buy electrical equipment or services from First Nation businesses today. For large transmission and distribution substations projects, that's not an easy thing to do. So by creating companies like BSync Power that can participate in these large projects through the supply of material and equipment, we're creating companies that can help contribute. We're creating a company that can help contribute to the growth of the grid, and especially the strategic importance that's coming up for Northern Ontario and the engagement of First Nations. There's some very large power projects, mining projects that need to be built across Canada and of course in Ontario. And community engagement and capacity build is an extremely important part of that.
The item that people don't understand is the effort required and the interest that's there. And kudos to you.
There are definitely always challenges with building a new business, but we found ourselves excellent business partners that are interested in growing a successful business in conjunction with us as a partner. Christine has a high level goal to create 20 jobs by 2025, and we're working on the details of how we do that. Looking into 2024, we're already working on a number of new supplier relationships and new announcements for Beasing Power, and excited for what the next year or so will bring.
And I think the Northeast projects are definitely going to keep her busy as they develop over the next few years. We're coming to the end, so Rob, any closing remarks before we finish this off?
Just, Dean, I really appreciate the invite to come out here. I keep telling you, I love your enthusiasm for this industry, your creative thinking, and the way you pursue all the different topics and ventures that you've had throughout your career. It's always a pleasure working with you, and thanks again for having me on today.
Thanks very much. Alexi, tell us what people need to know in your closing remarks.
Well, I think you nailed it when you named this Powerful Connections, Dean. It's almost like you were thinking of the supply chain meeting, but I'm sure it works for your other meetings too. But, certainly a supply chain is exactly that, right? A bunch of powerful connections. And like all of your stakeholders, make sure you're talking to your supply chain partners.
Thanks very much. So, Rob and Alexi, thank you for doing this episode of Powerful Connections. You are both shining stars in the industry, and I'm very proud to know you. Powerful Connections means even more today, thinking about all the issues we've covered in this episode. Rob, best of success to you in Beasing Power and Composite Power. Alexi, best of success to you in Northern Transformers. Thank you for tuning in to the Powerful Connections. We spoke to Brendan Fenton last episode. In the next episode, we'll be chatting with Brendan's partner, Nick Gation. Nick is the president of Power North Utility Contractors, Inc. from Whitefish, Ontario. Nick was the future his father and myself saw in our previous business, and that'll be the topic of our episode 12, The Future is Bright. Thank you for joining us today. Thanks for listening to this episode of Powerful Connections. Get in touch with me on my website at dgg5advising.com or find me on LinkedIn at Dean G. Gation. See you on the next episode.